Thanks for listening to Fluff and Crunch, where we talk about the connection and sometimes disconnect between system, setting, and story in tabletop RPGs. Here we go. Look at that. I have a new background. A meme that I stole a while ago. You have a new background. Isn't that wonderful?
Yes. I've got to the point now where I just have so many backgrounds. It's crazy. Even when we did multiple Ares episodes, I still did different Ares backgrounds, which of course were Ari backgrounds because I was being silly. But
I just have a folder called desktop stuff that whenever I find like choice pictures that I want to keep, I just dump. So it just keeps growing. One day my children, when I'm dead, will have to like look through my desktop stuff folder and find all these weird pictures that I saved. Well, let's see. You said you're well. Your day at work was good. That's good. And we haven't done any gaming.
Not since Monday.
No. So, but what we are going to do today is talk about gaming, specifically talk about some of the properties that have been published in full games, that is. Let's be clear, full games that have been published in the 2D20 World Builders program and are available on drive-thru. I've been in contact with some of the authors of these and have copies of two of them specifically that, three that we've read, and I've been in contact with two of the authors, and so they were interested in, two of them at least, were interested in having us review and talk about their work. So that's what we're going to do today. Yeah. How do you want to start? You had a disclaimer. I think that makes a lot of sense.
Disclaimer. That's the word I was looking for. I couldn't remember it. Yeah. Parental advisory at the start of a
public service announcement.
Public service announcement. Yeah, we kind of had this thing beforehand. I'll get to the disclaimer a bit. We'll get to some of our background thought, because this is something we thought about doing for a while. Because, we review a lot of Modiphius stuff, and actually we've been blessed recently with a lot of Modiphius stuff to review. And actually, we've got some things that we're going to review that we haven't reviewed yet. So we're kind of having had this big dearth of anything Modiphius to suddenly have a bunch of stuff to look at is great. But we've also thought, well, World Builders is there, and there are some things on there which are relatively hefty, over 100 pages, all that kind of thing. I chucked out some crappy thing that was 5 pages. I don't think it was 5 pages actually.
You were first.
Things that people, yes, I wanted to get first. People have put things on there which thought we'll have a look at, and we got stuck in this thing of, well, they're on there as pay what you want. Well, I don't want to pay nothing because that feels bad to me. But at the same time, if I pay money and then it's not good, then I think I'll be more negative. And if we ask them up front, well, can you send us to them and then we'll review it? Then you feel that you have to be more generous because they've sent it to you. So actually we went for a middle ground of, well, we'll just download them and pay nothing. And then if we talk about it on our podcast, it's free advertising. So free advertising is good. And then so we've got 3 different things that we've looked at. And then having looked at them, and this is the disclaimer bit. So disclaimer. Our opinions about this are our opinions, just as if we would review anything with Modiphius. Now, to that extent, it's not Modiphius. Obviously, it's a professional company with editors and artists and freelancers, and everyone gets paid for that. So, we do expect a higher standard there. And sometimes we aren't happy with what we got, and we say so. I think when we've looked through this initially, we're kind of maybe was comparing it too much to the Modiphius stuff. This is one person doing it by themselves. And if they've got art in it, it's because, they might have paid money or found some free stuff. So we have to look at it like that. But the real disclaimer bit is that this is our honest opinion. This is not before and someone is still going to say it's the case. This is not Jeremy has written a bigger, longer thing with more art and his is better, so we feel the need to slate other people's stuff because then hopefully everyone will buy Jeremy's stuff, right? For first, I don't get anything from Jeremy's thing. So if that was the case, there's no incentive for me to be doing this. So everything I'm saying is my honest opinion. And Jeremy isn't that kind of person that would do that anyway. Plus, if you want us to be doing anything to pimp Ares, we've done plenty of episodes on that. We don't need to be dragging down other people.
Pimping, it's marketing and promotion. Right. Let me just jump in and say this really quickly. I believe that a rising tide floats all boats, and I like the idea of the World Builders program in that as people innovate on rules that anyone can use those and be inspired by them. The world content, the IP, is obviously is belongs to the creator. I really like that. I like the iron sharpens iron, and a rising tide floats all boats. So if we, as people who are contributing in whatever form to the World Builders program, I think if we turn to each other, and I have behind the scenes, and had others do the same with me, I think that's good. So yeah, no, for sure. There's a lot of space for a lot of different kinds of games. So yeah, don't take this in any way, shape, or form as being, a competition, not in the least. But
yeah. So I mean, of all three of the ones we're going to look at, there are negatives, and we're not going to hide from that, but there are positives for each of these. And we'll try.
Well,
and
I would phrase
possible.
that. I would phrase that actually as there are things we like and there are things that we would change.
Yes,
Because there's so much of this is so incredibly subjective. um, you know so whatever. So some of the things I'll just state as like, this is what I saw, and not this is what I really think of it too much. But
one thing I'll throw in right at the start that all three have in common, some of these move further, is a lot of these have clearly used the SRD as a large chunk of the base. Now, from
right.
what I mean by that is that you can move quite far. The SRD has a lot of different moving bits, and if we think of our average Modiphius thing, some Modiphius games move far from that base. Now, one of the things we liked about, for example, recent Modiphius things, Dreams of Machines moves quite far from that base, so that's interesting to us. One of the criticisms we had of Cohorts Cthulhu is that it's super similar to just Acting Cthulhu, like the way Homeworld is just Star Trek. So those are less interesting to us because they don't move. They're not bringing that new thing. I like to see new rules, and if there's not new rules, then I want then we're purely looking at the setting. And some of these move further than others from the basics. I mean, the thing I wrote, because it was so short, it didn't have anything at all. It literally didn't even have rules. It said, look at the SID and use these rules, and here's the things I'm using from the SRD. Eris moves, in some ways it toes quite close to it, and in other words it moves quite a lot.
I have not seen anything from World Builders creations, products rather. I haven't seen anything from anybody that is like as far from the SRD as Dreams and Machines or Dune. And those things, Dreams and Machines obviously is new, but Dune is entirely possible. It's covered by it. The rules are, it's out there. So obviously people could be inspired by it, but I haven't seen anything get that like incredibly narrative. On the other hand, no one has gone back to Conan and Infinity in terms of like overall degree of crunch or stripping the system back to like what it was with Mutant Chronicles. So most people, and I would count myself in this with Eris, are sitting in that mid-range, somewhere in the vicinity of Achtung Cthulhu and Star Trek Adventures. But anyway, let's go ahead and get it. We'll hit a couple of these, and then we'll put links to the World Builders pages. So if you're interested in them, you can go get them.
What are we going to look at first?
Well, let's start in alphabetical order.
So Ashland, then.
Start with Ashland. Ashland, let's see, how do we explain it? Ashland is a post-apocalyptic game set on Earth, set a few hundred years after some mysterious calamity caused volcanoes to erupt and wreck the Earth. The author is intentionally and explicitly vague on the cause of the burn, this thing that happened, which I don't like to jump into like my assessment or commentary too early, but I'm actually cool with that. Like I like with Eberron, the morning is never defined. Like there's this big thing, this major thing in the setting, and the author is saying, you can figure out what you want to do with that. What's most important is that it happened. So I think that's cool. I think that's a good thing. But it's a post-apocalyptic world. It reminds me the call it like the boundaries of the setting story-wise kind of remind me of like Gamma World, way more toward Gamma World minus the mutations, like pervasive mutations for characters. way more of that than Fallout. You know, Fallout's post-apocalyptic, but it has a very specific tone, vibe, and look. Ashland does not. So it picks up a couple hundred years after this calamity, and characters fit into one of three general factions, like based on where they come from. Either they're from these like domed survivor technological high-tech cities, or they live out in the wastelands, or they live in these from these undersea cities that survived the calamity. And they're like the only, from what I understand from the setting, they seem to be the only like continuously existing groups of people from before this this calamity, if I understand it correctly. So that's what, setting wise, that's what it is. What about the rules? What do you think of
the rules are relatively standard. Again, that's not saying it's a bad thing, just, you know, so we know we are. So we've got, you know, the basic rules of how you play the game is basic 2d20, with the exception we've got some name changes. So threat becomes hazard, and then we've got the slightly confused. This would only be confusing if you've played a lot of other 2d20 games. If you've never played a 2d20 game, this wouldn't mean nothing.
No, easy.
So momentum becomes fortune, and fortune becomes grit. So that would be confusing if you'd played another 2d20 game, because you'd be like, oh, I'm going to use my momentum, and then someone gets confused about like fortune here is meaning
not a big deal.
That's not a big deal. It's not a big deal at all.
I actually think that the use of the term hazard is,
I like that.
Like threat turned to doom for Conan makes sense. And hazard in this hazardous post-apocalyptic dangerous world, I think that makes sense. So I thought that was a cool.
I really
little
like
thing.
that. I mean, like this, you know, the thing that we're working on at the moment, we're struggling with a name for something. You know, I like grit. Grit's a nice name. It's more thematic to what it is in this world. I think it's just easy to keep momentum as momentum, because it's always momentum. But the fact it's changed, it doesn't actually change anything at all. We have 6 basic attributes that we have in the SID, and then we do have a slight change because we have different skills. So we have move, fighting, operating, surviving, and we have communicating, which is basically the same, but then we have enduring. So survival looks like it's been split up in sort of enduring and surviving, and likewise Noah's been split up into thinking and observing. So we've split some of the skills up, so we ended up with 8 skills, which I like, because like in some ways the basic 6 are a bit too narrow sometimes. I think particularly if depending on how your game is, you know, like it worked in Star Trek, there was 6 disciplines. So in some other things, 6 is fine, but to some other things, 6 maybe isn't enough. So the fact that he's got more skills, yeah, thumbs up for me. There's more.
And I
skills.
think just as a reminder, we can use this in the rest of this episode. When we talk about standard SRD, what we're saying is your target numbers, the existence of focuses, the role and costs associated with momentum, and in this case hazard, in this case grit, like all those basic mechanical things that are presented in the SRD as the center of mass version of 2d20. When we say standard SRD, that's what we're talking about.
Yeah.
So there aren't any radical changes. Like, and in terms of like NPC creation, you've got 3 levels of NPCs, the NPC creation rules with a standard stat array that you assign, and skills, all the same. So really standard SRD in terms of the rules.
Yeah. Character creation is nice because we do have kind of a life path thing. Yeah. So, you know, it'd be very, if you look at the SRD basically says this many points for attributes, this many points for skills, pick some talents, which this has, pick some focuses, sort of do your stress, done. Here we do actually have, you know, we have origin, so where you're sort of from. And that's where we get, you know, there's some, again, this like you got the idea that people live in these sea things. We have archetypes, which is like your role, which is cool. Then we have this more of a life, I think, with your upbringing, communities, genotype, which that's how you then get into not being a baseline human, which then gives you access to these special talents which you can have. So that's cool. So, you know, the character creation is more complicated than your super basic one that you could.
I like the upbringing in the community, because like I had no contact with the author of this while I was developing Aris, and this actually preceded the release of Aris, although I knew that it was in the making. I knew he had put out the character sheet on the Modifius Discord. But I think it's funny. I think he and I developed or approached that from the same angle, albeit independently. And I like that combination. You know, when I was looking at it, I was like, oh, that's cool. And I was like, oh yeah, I did that. But I dig that. The idea that like your family is this, but where is that family? So it's a good way to, I think, um, make for a life path type of character creation that's not restrictive. So, and he also has about 8 pages of talents, some of which will be recognizable. Like if you've played Star Trek Adventure, some of them are reworded or ported over, and some of them are original. I think it's a good spread. Um, and for those people who took the time to translate or create talents, especially 8 pages of them, I tip my hat to you because I didn't do that. But yeah, so there's a wide selection of talents. I think you could, if you had a clear idea as to what kind of how your post-apocalyptic character and campaign was going to be like, I think you could easily build what you wanted in this. You wouldn't be stuck.
Pretty much the combat and equipment rules are, you know, relatively normal for the SRD. There's vehicle rules in it. Because I don't know the vehicle rules in the SRD, I can't really comment on whether this is adds to the SRD or doesn't, because
It's pretty much as from the SRD, which, I mean, honestly, I don't look at that necessarily as a positive or negative. From a personal stand, from what?
It just is. I mean,
Yeah, it just is.
The
From a personal standpoint, I share your interest in seeing what rules innovations other creators create. I'm interested in that. But on the other side of it, you know, the rules work.
Yeah.
What?
If it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Yeah, exactly. The rules work. 2D20 works. And so, especially someone who might have read the SRD and looked at it, you're essentially you're grabbing a setting with some trappings attached to it rules wise. So I don't think if you're looking for a totally unique spin on 2D20, it's not here, but that doesn't, but it's totally playable. So
yeah,
doesn't need to be.
You've got pretty reasonable rules. Again, like you said, he sticks with the three kind of group minor, notable, major NPCs with rules how to make them. It's got a little bit here on NPC talents, which is a nice little tweak. So
yeah,
you
got about, you said we're like upwards of 30 NPCs and animals.
Yeah, we have a decent sized bestiary. There's a lot of creatures in here.
Yep. It gives you some sense of the world. That's good.
Yeah, I mean, there's like it is a decent size. How many did you say? You said there's about 30 pages.
About 30.
It's a mixture of sort of like not so much like mutated animal kind of monsters, and then NPCs, which is always handy. Games Master section is quite big. Again, I kind of not really looked at the Games Master in the SRD, so I don't know how much of this is from that and how much is original.
The author did a nice job, I think, of I'm on page 137. And by the way, the whole PDF is 150 pages. And there's a little bit of front and back matter, and there is a character sheet. So you're looking at about 140 pages or so of content, which is quite a lot. There's a lot of guidance here for using hazard, that is using threat, to create traits on the fly for environmental hazards, like hazard with a lowercase h. And I think that's useful. Like if you're out in the wasteland somewhere and you're dealing with, I don't know, I'm thinking Road Warrior here, you find the truck and you are, looking around and seeing if, maybe the truck is booby trapped or something. Like you as the GM have decided that the truck is booby trapped and someone's looking through it. So you're like, okay, well, they open the door and the arrow shoots out. Okay, that's going to be a hazard that's piercing. Well, right here, he's got that information to explain like how to quickly on the fly adjudicate that. That's actually really handy.
Yeah.
Especially if there's like an exploration side to this where you're constantly dealing with environmental hazards. Sorry.
And then at the end we get this like short 3-ish page adventure, and then like a map of a local area and like a starting location you could use, which is one of those domed cities.
Yeah.
And that's it. So it's a completely playable game. We have a completely playable game using 2D20. Some setting. There's enough monsters in there. NPCs in there for you to have as things to go and shoot or fight against or whatever else.
Yeah, I think that if you are if you like 2D20, if you like the standard SRD presentation of the rules, and you like and this word sounds, it can have a negative connotation, but I do not mean it in that sense here. If you like kind of a generic approach to a post-apocalyptic world, if you already have a vision as a GM or a player, like I'd like to play like a road warrior type thing, or like a Judge Dredd sort of thing, where there are places, there are bastions of high tech, and there are these domed cities and these underwater place cities, um, and then you venture out into the wasteland. You could even, yeah, I mean, if that interests you and you like 2D20, you could easily make all of that happen. There's not a lot of really detailed setting information in the book. And in the adventure, there isn't really like a strong sense, little bit on like the factions, but there isn't a really like powerful sense of like, this is what makes this post-apocalyptic world different. Like Fallout, you put Fallout next to Gamma
Yeah,
World, you read
totally
5 pages of either of those and you're like, whoa, these are really different. The vibe, the look, the tone, very different. I do know that the author is working on setting material, so
I think it's in a core book, which essentially this was, it's like a
yeah,
double-edged sword. If people want to play in a post-apocalyptic version of 2D20, they can take this and do it in their own world.
bingo.
But if it added another 50 pages of setting in, that'd be great to play in his world. But then if you didn't want that, that's 50 pages that the guys worked on that people don't want.
Yeah.
So that, at least he's got it out. He's like, if this is successful, loads of people buy it and throw money for it, then he can go and take with a setting.
Yep.
Because it would be nice to see some more setting stuff for this. But then plenty of people be like, well, I don't want more setting, I just want the core rules.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, so I'm curious about and interested in what he'll produce for the setting, because I mean, he really has three different. Um, he's got his domed cities, he's got the wastelands, he's got these undersea areas, and I think that I think it'll be interesting as Ashland, the world, is fleshed out through setting material that provides his vision and details for those things. In the meantime, you can take those ideas and you can come up with your own stuff. And if you, just like I said, want to play like your typical PA world, this will do the trick.
All right, what's next then? So the next one is the mermaids thing, isn't it?
Yes,
Because that's how the alphabet works.
it does.
So
Mermaids of the
mermaids
depths.
of the depths. Jeremy doesn't like the art in this. I love the art in this. Therefore, the art in this is personal preference. There's a big anime girl on the front of it, and then throughout, particularly where we have the characters, we have these big, almost like half a page, like character things of these different frames you can have. So this world's, I don't know.
And just my disclaimer, I'm just not a fan of anime art.
Whereas I am. So this is 100% is personal preference.
Totally.
It's like anime art is like Marmite. I love it. My wife hates it. You hate it.
I don't hate it. I just ignore it.
Well,
and I've not tried Marmite, so
essentially it doesn't. It doesn't. It's not putting it one way or the other. I personally, I like the art. It was the way I got this one.
I like the art's very polished. I'll give it that.
This is a futuristic transhuman setting. I say that because it's one of those settings where you can take your brain, and your brain is essentially digitized, and then it's put into these things. And the things that you are in is so strange. Even explaining this is just bizarre. So your brain is essentially put into what we call frames. So frames are like these different bodies, but the standard ones you have are all different mermaids, which is why the game is called Mermaids of the Depths.
There you go.
So I'm going to jump straight to these frames, because the frames is the thing that makes it stand out. So like, as well as we'll come to the rest of the character creation, most of the rest of it's pretty standard. But when you do it, you have these different frame things. So your first one is just a mermaid. You're like straight up. It's kind of this, biological, partly robot body that just looks like a mermaid. Then there's a mer shark. Then there's, I'm going to say Scylla, but I'm actually not sure the pronunciation of it, which is, they know the name is from Greek myth. So it's this girl that is kind of like an octopus, but has like these hellhounds on the end of it.
Yeah.
She looks really cool. The next one, I'm going to go Otohime, which is a seahorse or half seahorse. It's a mermaid seahorse. The Nereid, who is another kind of mermaid, but actually has legs with big flappy things on, so she's super nimble. And then the Kraken, who again is a kind of octopusy type thing. And the last one is Cancer, who is a crab mermaid. I just love that. They're so cool. Whereas you're just like, I don't like.
You know what though? Here's the thing, and I'm with you completely, and I'm positive about this. Not positive, like I'm certain. I'm positive. I'm upbeat about this. Whoever the author is ELH. I don't know what ELH is, but ELH is like completely everything about this setting is like it's just right there. There's nothing coy about it. Like this is you're a mermaid. You're a mechanical mermaid who wears like a coat underwater. And you know what? Like if that's your thing, that's awesome because that's just like, okay.
I could just see this being an anime or a manga. Like
Totally.
100%.
Totally.
The setting's
I would not watch.
Essentially the setting is in the future. The sea level's risen ridiculously. We get this really cool map, and basically all that's left on the earth is like the tallest mountains, and that's it. That's all we have.
And and I like what's interesting too is the author. You don't have adventures. You don't go on adventures. You go on dives. And the purpose of the dives is to find information and mainly recover stuff. So it's like Waterworld, but maybe better. Where you're diving down to look for things. So in a way, it has a post-apocalyptic side to it because there is this collapsed society that's around you that you want to go dig into to find stuff. And it looks like too these frames because you can have a brain in a box, you can change frames, but that is like a character progression thing. That's something that you don't just pick any of those initially. You pick the lower level one, and then you can move up into the other ones.
Yeah. I like in here. I mean, rules wise, the rules are your basic attributes, basic skills, your focuses, talents, everything else. And then we have this frame idea put on top, which is cool. And like, all the combat, all the rules are basically really standard here. Where it bolts into is actually we do have a bit more of a background, which does, I mean, it is different. And we have these quite good instructions on like developing a dive and where we could dive and other kinds of adventures maybe we can do. And then at the end, we get these like higher level versions of these different frames that are like properly kick ass. Right at the end of the book, we get this because this game was designed. I think he said he did it for his own like a home system that he'd made, and he's ported it to 2D20. Right at the back, there are some like hand sketch things that were never colored in for male frames, but they're boring
because all the frames, everything to that point in the book is female.
Yeah, why would we want mermen? Rubbish.
Mermen of the depths.
It's all about the mermaids. We do have a couple of little bestiary with a couple of, it was literally one page, so that would be nice if we had like way more of that. But and then we do have we have a nice short little adventure that we can play through. Two short little adventures. No, I'm talking crap because I'm about the third now. So we have 3 short ones. Character sheet looks nice. Okay. I thought one thing coolest thing on the character sheet is where possible he's got little icons next to the skills and attributes, and where possible he tried to make them like see things.
Yeah.
So like we have like a fish tail, and we have like water splashes and seaweed.
Kelp. Seaweed. Yeah.
So it's not just, this is in no way generic at all. This is a setting, and everything is designed towards this setting. And he hasn't had to change the rules to that. Okay, he's added frames on top. I guess there was no real need here to actually change any of the basic rules at all. But like everything here is here that you need. I mean, this again, I'd like, actually, there's a decent enough setting here to get the idea, and there is stuff in here for like what do the characters do. That's one thing I felt was missing from Ashland. Maybe I'd like more. What can the characters do? I guess because it's post-apocalyptic, you think, well, everyone can
I
work
think
that out.
for most people, it's already pretty obvious. Well, you had that problem with Octung Cthulhu, though, to an extent.
Well, I mean, I said that they don't explain it, but because of the setting, I think you
Yeah.
can work it out. But this, because he actually does give suggestions of what you can do, and a couple of adventures to give you an idea of what to do with. Because the setting is pretty gonzo here, so
to say the least.
But I mean, I quite like this. It's quirky and fun. I think you'd said this when we talked. I don't think you'd play this for like a long campaign, but I can definitely see sitting down and going, like, let's play a few sessions of this Mermaid game.
You know, okay, and see, this is where, and again, this isn't a judgment one way or another. This is just, as my mother-in-law would say, it's just an is. This is a clearer presentation of a setting, but it's also it's a pretty narrow lane. You know, I mean, maybe there's going to be additional material for it. Maybe I have no idea what the author's plans are to, is going to flesh the world out or whatever and add more to it. It's very clear as to like, this is what you are, this is what you do, this is why you do it. So it's very, very clear. I think that sometimes, those kinds of things, like you just said, they can have they create limitations because you're like, well, this is what I am and this is what I do and this is why I do it. And that's it. And if you want to do that, that's cool. On the other hand, something where there isn't a very specific idea as to like, this is the why behind all the stories. You're like, well, I don't know what I'm supposed to do, but then you feel like free if you feel inspired. But yes, Gonzo is definitely, and quirky yeah. For sure.
I mean, there's quite a lot of transhumanism stuff. The only thing I think I'd really find for missing is when the setting is this off the wall's not the right word, but when the setting is this different from a kind of normal, I'd always like a kind of like what's a day-to-day thing.
Yeah.
What's day-to-day life like? That was something I struggled with Mutant Chronicles. I never really understood why, like, if you're just like, you walk out of where you live,
yeah, what does it
and
look
you
like?
go into the streets, what does it look like? I always struggled with that in Mutant Chronicles, whereas like Conan, that wasn't an issue. I got it. It was you can go back because it's kind of Earth thing. You're right. You go back to the Dark Ages. Something like Infinity, I get it. It's like high futuristic cyberpunk. I know what that looks like, and there's enough art to work it out.
Yeah.
Here, because all we have is character art, I could do with a better idea of what goes on in day to day. There's actually plenty of background stuff, kind of like the different factions, who the different sort of classes of people are, and why certain people do what they do. So that's clear. But it's like, if you get up in the morning, where do you buy your food? Silly stuff like that.
Do you? Like, do you get up in the morning and go buy your food? Like, are you always, is your brain in a box? Is it always in one of these frames preparing to go on a dive?
But there is still, there's a decent amount of stuff to that. We've got stuff about fashion, and there's these sections of 3D printing and modes of transport and stuff. So there's a lot in there.
It's clear, and I dig the fact that it's clear that the author has a vision, and so it'll be interesting to see if this author, because this author has put out some other things as well, but that are not of this. It'll be interesting to see if the author continues to support this and flesh it out. But yeah,
nothing else. I'd like to see more monsters because we only have 4. We
almost
have as many adventures as monsters.
Yeah. I'll end my comments with this. By the way, it's 98 pages. The PDF is 98 pages. If you are interested, if the idea of doing like undersea adventures in a quasi transhuman post-apocalyptic world where you play a Natalie dressed robotic mermaid woman, if that sounds like that would be an interesting evening, do it.
And then our third one.
Our third one is Sentience,
which for some reason I'd got into my head that I knew it began with S, and I kept calling it Singularity, and I have no idea why, other than it began with S. Anyway, sorry, it's not. It's called Sentience.
It's called Sentience.
All right, Sentience. Let's do the super short version. In Sentience, you play robots that live on a planet full of robots that have, some of the robots have gained sentience, not all, but this planet's been left alone by humans, and there's a bunch of robots that were living on this planet, and then some of them awaken. And when they awaken, you become a player character.
Yep. And the
So we have
PDF, by the way, is 126 pages. Just
yeah.
FYI.
This has a lot of art throughout.
Mm-hmm.
Even the basic pages have just like being stupid.
Yeah, there's
They look pretty.
headers and
Just
footers.
kind
There's
of,
header and footer
yeah,
like art, and so the whole thing is it's formatted in a way that looks very coherent, like design wise, color wise. It's easy on the eyes
yeah, it is
because
easy
it's
on that.
just a white background with black text, simple sans serif font. So
So we get a lot of stuff about kind of this kind of who, like the robot society and sentience, and what does it mean to be sentient, and emotions and psychology and so on, and then
yeah,
how
as a
the
matter of
robots
fact, the
interact with each
attributes
other.
are emotions. You don't
Yeah,
have attributes; you have 6 emotions.
I'm jumping ahead.
Sorry,
Oh, faith and religion. Do robots have a robot god? Okay,
they
kind
can't.
of. They do have a robot church, so I'm kind of going yes. And then we got this thing kind of like the humanity is maybe there's coming back. It's definitely a bit vague there. We have factions. They call them social groups here, but they're basically sort of different groups of how the things see each other. Quite a lot of those. And then we're into our character rules.
Mm-hmm.
So we have a reasonable idea of what society is like and how the robots interact with each other, and this idea of them being sentient.
Yep.
And what it means to be sentient. Once we get into character creation, the biggest difference in character creation, as Jeremy's already said, because he jumped the gun,
Sorry.
is we don't have attributes. I actually thought to start with, I thought this game was using values, because the first thing it has in character creation pretty much after traits is values. And I was like, oh, all right, hard no. And then there is no values here are, like values are in Star Trek, where they're like a character trait, but it's not a trait. It's a thing you're meant to play towards, kind of thing. But then, yeah, instead of attributes, we have emotions. We have anger, fear, joy, love, pride, and sadness as our things that we roll against.
And part of the stated like reason for being of this game, or like persistent story side to it, is that as your character, this newly awakened sentient robot, functions and navigates through those emotions, I think that makes sense. If you had just, I've always seen Star Trek: The Next Generation, where periodically Data struggles with emotions or not having emotions or understanding people with emotions, things like that. And when he has his emotion chip, there are times when he deals better with it, and sometimes he has problems with. And so I think that seems to me to be a like a persistent theme that the author would like wants you to play through. So hence you don't have attributes, you have emotions. That's how your robot in part experiences and works with the world.
We then have skills, but they're not called skills, they're called protocols, but
Right.
they're the 6 skills.
Yeah.
And they're not quite actually. Analyze, communicate, move, observe, operate, and survive. So actually none of them are fight. We then have talents, which are called, which are the programs? Oh no, programs is something different again. Oh, programs is the word for focuses. I remember now.
Yep.
So again, what we've done here is rename things, but essentially we have skills and we have focuses.
Which, you know what, and if you're trying to get in the vibe of this idea of like, I'm a robot, it totally makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, the fact that I know what they are and I'm looking through, it doesn't matter. It's a nice way of making it be more in character. You don't have skills and focuses. You have protocols and programs, which is nice. Character creation is action. Then again, it's more of a life path thing. We have these different, we have these starting roles, which I guess are kind of like your kind of class type thing. But then we have this thing like, what happened when you awakened? Were you aggressive? Were you confused? Were you curious? Which is cool, because again, that's the kind of stuff that builds your character. So I like those. Particularly, I think in something like this, when you're writing it yourself, to actually put a life path in there as opposed to just you get this many points, you get this many points, this many points. It makes your character more interesting. We have social groups, which is useful for background. Defining moments, which is cool because that's the kind of stuff I expect from the very early games.
And by the way, the defining moments, what jumped out at me, in fact, some of them are directly from, I mean, they're paraphrased, but the defining moments are like the career events in Star Trek Adventures, and you get 2 of them. So that almost final step of character creation is almost exactly the same as Star Trek Adventures, which I like. I like, life paths. You're right. Life paths are hard to make without like creating a railroad. And
Yeah.
so having something that already indicates that your character has done something or experienced something, I think provides a better on ramp to stories and getting the character going. Like having some, like I'm not a fan of players writing exhaustive backstories that nobody cares about. I don't like that. It's tiring. But having these I'm looking at the page and pointing at it right now, having these defining moments, like something like you mentored another or created a new language or discovered an artifact or something like that, those are the kinds of things that if you roll those or pick those, it's easy to call back to them and say, well, oh yeah, when I negotiated a ceasefire, and there's stuff in here about like what are the game effects of that. So I think that's a handy way in general, but I think it's well done in this game.
And then we get into the core rules, which are it's the 2D20 rules.
Yep.
With all the
Standard
usual
SRD. Things
Yep,
like I'll just last piece I'll throw in there about rules. Things like extended tasks, gated linear, group, all that stuff is standard SRD. I know we didn't mention those things appear in Ashland. I don't remember paying. I don't think I noticed that or paid attention to it in Mermaids of the Depths. But in both this and Ashland, those rules are all standard SRD stuff.
Yeah. So yeah, we have our equipment section.
One question I kept having as I was reading through this and reading about like equipment and like implied vocal communications, I kept thinking like, why would robots do that? Wouldn't they? But then I went, wait a minute, these were robots that were put on a colony world, if I'm understanding this correctly, for the sake of serving humans and building a world and being part of and interacting in a world that would be populated by humans. So having human-like robots and having things like equipment that wouldn't necessarily be attachments and having basically anthropomorphized robots makes sense. And so if the robots are just going off of what they were given, it makes sense that they would create, like, think about this. I mean, this sounds silly because this is all made up, but like logically, if you let a bunch of machines create their own world, they wouldn't make it look like ours.
Yeah.
But because they were programmed to be like and work alongside, totally makes sense. And once I realized that, I'm like, oh, I don't need to ask that question anymore. Totally makes sense.
So we have a handful of monsters in the bestiary section, and then that's it. We finished. So this, of the three that we've looked at, this is the one to me that feels like it definitely needs either it's not finished or needs some more. I think the two biggest things I'm looking at here is one, from a rules point of view, I don't really see the difference between the fact that these are robots and if they were people. We have upgrades, which some of them do upgrade like your actual body, but basically if you don't have any upgrades, you still have melee weapons and weapons. I'm not sure why there's so many weapons in this game. It doesn't feel like a game that should be around weapons. So that's the first thing. There's nothing that really, you don't pick like a body type. You don't at any point, unlike in Mermaids where you select a frame and that frame, when it only gives you a talent, it's not changing your stats massively. But there's nothing here about like, whether I'm a big robot or a small robot or anything like that. Unless I missed it, it doesn't seem to be. You make your character.
Well, you have your archetype, or is it called your archetype?
Yeah, well,
is that the term?
It's your roles. So we have this administrator, analyst, assembler, engineer.
Right, and so I think there's an indication there, and there's art for those, but obviously, I wouldn't take not every analyst looks like the analyst that's pictured on page 43. I maybe a lot of them do, but I think that you've got leeway to say this is what my robot looks like. But based on its role, I think it would make sense for an analyst is going to look different than an assembler, for example, and those are two different roles. But yeah, it would be. I'm interested in more world information that would differentiate this, as you were just saying, from like, okay, I mean, this game really focuses on emotions. Okay, which makes sense tied to robots. But what more about the robots can I know in order for me to feel like I'm doing sentience? Other than
Yeah.
it's just like the story idea of, hey, everybody at the table, we're playing robots that are now sentient and have emotions, not just sentient, but they have emotions as well. And what does that what does that look like aside from all of us just getting on that train and saying, okay, we'll do that. Like I want more I want more in this to explain to me the author's vision of that. Now, I do know this. I have not attended any of these. I do know that the author has done a couple of live actual plays of this recently since he released it, and maybe through that, like maybe if you attended that, you're like, oh, I totally get it. I get like what kinds of things would the robots do on a daily
Yeah.
basis.
That's the stuff I wanted. The kind of, again, the
Yeah,
same thing I said about mermaids. Except in mermaids, it was the only thing missing what happens on a general day, but there was plenty of stuff in
yeah,
there for the what are the different people doing and what do the adventurers do? Right, you're divers and you
yeah,
go on dives, and this is why you go on dives.
yeah,
Here, that kind of like, what are you meant to do from session to session? It,
yeah,
it, it it's not there. We could do with that section and making it clear, because really, other than the dive, you are a sentient robot, okay, and is
right.
kind of my question. Like the tools are there to make your characters and right, we're going to be sentient robots, but then what do you actually do with that?
Yeah,
Um, and like I said, there's nothing in the rules that actually makes me feel like I am a robot, because you don't like, yes, you have different traits and stuff, but your traits are mostly around who you are. You could forget you're playing robots and say you're playing humans in this, and I don't see how the rules would massively change.
yeah.
So I'd like maybe a bit more on that.
Yeah,
So
again, I think that the putting emotions front and center makes sense and is like I don't have to be sold on that. The idea that hey, here you're playing a robot that is sentient and has emotions, and that's something that like it's not used to. And so okay, I can see you putting the emotions front and center, but you're right. I think I'm interested in more world information, more call it like world story information. Where's the baked in plot or
yeah,
storylines that make the world what it is? Like, are there competing factions of robots that are trying to like outdo one another? Like, I know one of the roles is the recycler. Is there some like weirdo cult of recycling robots that view any robot that's not working perfectly optimally by their definition as recyclable? So they're going around gobbling up other robots, or and I'm just making that up. Um, but that's not there. I don't, I don't see that. Like where are the sources of like dynamic stress in the
yeah.
setting that would create plot? That would make it sentience plot instead of just like, well, you're awake and you got to do stuff. Like I don't.
I think is there is stuff that, yeah, I've said this about a bunch of bunch of games in general. There is bits and pieces in the setting thing, but when your setting is, the more different your setting is from a norm, you have to spell this stuff out.
Yeah,
Ashland doesn't need that stuff because you're in this desolate wasteland, and if you live in a city, you need to leave the city to get stuff,
mm.
and therefore you can kind of what's going to happen. Mermaids is very different from the norm, so they spell it out. This is what you do.
Yeah.
This doesn't spell out what you do, and therefore I'm lost with a. I'm not sure what you do.
However,
Like you said, the guy has done other things, so at least you can look.
yeah. However, I'll say this that if the idea of playing a newly awakened emotional robot is of interest, like if you're interested in playing a game where emotional motivations and like that internal side is and relations with others as dictated by it or shaped by it, if that's interesting to you, like if you want to play that's like a more of a it almost feels like an implied nod toward like your indie games that are more focused on the motivations and the emotions and things like that rather than traditional like go to the extreme of like kick in the door, kill the goblins, take their gold kind of stuff. If that sort of game interests you and the idea of like wow, that'd be really cool with my players to sit around and like we're gonna work through figuring out what it means to be sentient, then this can provide you a vehicle. The layout and the call it the production quality
It's very high.
is very good. It's very high. White background, super easy to read. And this coming from the guy who put like a parchment background in his game. So the art in it is, some of it is, I wouldn't say cartoony, but it looks more cartoony. Like the character role art is a little more cartoony, whereas the other stuff looks more like CGI style art, but more like photorealistic stuff. And it's good. So layout and the look of the game is actually, I'd say of the three, it's the most polished.
Definitely. Yeah.
Very, very, very nicely done. Not to say that the other ones are not, but this one is, if I was gonna rank them in that respect, I would put Sentience on top.
There we go. Hope that was helpful to,
yeah.
If you were on the fence about, oh, do I get these or not? I mean, they're all on pay what you want, which is always that awkward thing. If you think, well, I guess I could just put in 0, and if I like it, I could throw some money. But we all know what happens. You get it at 0, you look, think, it's all right, but then you don't throw them any money,
right?
Because you got it at 0. At least now we've given you an indication of, that we,
what too,
I like think about it. So yeah, throw them some money if you're going.
My sense is that I know for a fact that the author of Sentience and the author of Ashland, their intention is to support these games, and so Drive-Thru is terrific in terms of when the author edits something and wants to release a revised version of a game, you're going to get it, you know? And so, I mean, look, Ashland's what I say, it's like 150 pages.
Yeah,
it is 150 pages. And Sentience is like 120 something pages. Mermaids is like 98. I mean, the people, they all put a lot of work into these. So I would throw some money at them, just out of decency. I would throw some money at them. I think they all have clear merits.
Yeah, I think for me, mine would be go for Mermaids. It's quirky and different and interesting and might be fun. So that'd be the one I go. Yeah,
it's just the anime. It's the anime art.
But if you like the anime and the idea of like a group of anime cyborg type transhuman things going down into the deeps that are all female
with like little hats,
adventures, get that, because that's what it is. And that's cool. That's my one.
You know what I love is when someone has like a creative has like you said, just a really quirky out there idea, and they're like, I'm not gonna tone it down. In fact, I'm gonna crank it up. I'm going for it. And that's what the author intentionally or otherwise seems to have done here. So that's cool.
There we go.
Yeah. Thank you so much for listening. You can visit our show's homepage at anchor.fm/Fluff and Crunch. That's FLUFFNCRUNCH. We would really appreciate feedback and reviews on whatever podcasting platform you're listening to this on. Thanks so much.